Okay, where do we start as far as the state of the Lakers as we sit now? Just finished watching Golden State kind of crush the hopes of another team, Oklahoma City, making ridiculous shots. But let's talk about the state of the Lakers and the state of the league because they're one and the same. A couple of weeks ago during the All-Star weekend, Adam Silver talked about unintended consequences of the 2011 collective bargaining agreement and the resultant unintended consequences. Now, it's kind of hard to talk about unintended consequences if you don't know what the CBA was about. And for most sports fans, they thought it was about money, which in a sense it was. The 1 or 2% that they got back from the players really wasn't the crux of what the CBA was about, even though that was the headlines. But like I say, sometimes things belong in the business section and not the sports section. It needs to be in the Wall Street Journal and not ESPN, the magazine. What the collective bargaining agreement was about was a reaction to two things. One was the Paul Gasol trade that the Lakers pulled off with Memphis because Memphis really couldn't afford to keep him. And the second thing was the LeBron James going to Miami. So the small market teams who couldn't keep up with the larger market teams, which is New York, Miami, Los Angeles, and even to a small degree Dallas, they couldn't outbid those teams for player services. Now, what was supposed to happen and what the NBA wanted, the league wanted, was something similar to what the NFL has. What the NFL has in their CBA, in their particular salary structure, allows for a dispersion or a dispersal as even as possible of talent, so that every year or every couple of years, just about every team has a chance to actually win. So if you have a dispersal of talent amongst the veterans, then it's just the skill of each individual management group to actually pick and develop their own players. That's what the CBA was supposed to ensure. And it was supposed to penalize larger teams or more successful teams from stacking players. In other words, if you win a championship, you might win it 2 years in a row. But the thing is, those players will be in high demand and they're going to demand higher salaries. So you're going to have to bleed off pieces of your team. You can't stack those teams. You can't hold championship teams together longer than 2 years. Look at Oklahoma City. Where would Oklahoma City be if they kept the beard in Oklahoma rather than him going to Houston? That's the salary cap in action, the dispersal of talent to keep teams like the Lakers, especially Jerry Buss and the Buss family, from doing what they had been doing for the past 30 years. So even with the large TV contract that the Lakers were going to get from Time Warner, which the league knew was coming, and they were deathly afraid of what the Lakers and Kobe Bryant would do with all that money. Now, Mitch, Jim, and Jerry, to their credit, they saw this coming, and they tried an end around, which was the failed deal for Chris Paul that the league had originally tried to engineer for the Clippers, and the Clippers and the New Orleans Hornets couldn't come to an agreement, and the deal fell through. Jerry Buss and Mitch and Jim knew that they had desirable pieces, so they engineered a deal to come in and sweep up on the ball on the pieces that the Clippers failed to come to an agreement with, which would, one, refresh their talent, two, reduce their salary cap, and three, give them a building block so they could acquire another superstar to go along with Chris Paul and Kobe. And the infamous meeting that Jeanie Buss was attending at the time, where the league got wind of that deal, even though it was perfectly legal. You basically had a revolt of the small market teams. How the hell could you let the Lakers do this to us again when you promised us that things were going to be fairer? And with this deal, the Lakers may do to us what they've been doing to us for the last 10 years. They weren't having it. So David Stern and Adam Silver basically crushed the deal, unwound the deal, sent back two unhappy players, and there you have it. They basically hamstrung one of their members, their crown jewel, and brought him back to the pack, so that this particular collective bargaining agreement, this plan could go forward. What the unintended consequence was is that they didn't expect that all this new money would come into the league, that the popularity of the league and the sponsors would actually come into the NBA. So basically now you've basically leveled the whole league. That's what you did. You leveled the whole league. You cut down the big trees so that other trees could pop up. And guess what happened? You got the Golden State Warriors. The Golden State Warriors are making a mockery of basically a leveled league, a flattened league that you actually put up. There are no strong teams that actually compete with the Golden State Warriors. 2009, the 2008 to 2010 Lakers would have crushed the Golden State Warriors. Trust and believe. Bynum and Gasol, those two 7-footers, those two active 7-footers couldn't be handled inside. There's no way in hell Draymond Green or whoever you're going to put up against them are going to handle those two 7-footers. It's not happening. Along with Kobe Bryant on the outside, it wasn't going to happen. So now that you have the Golden State Warriors making a mockery of this league, and there's no team in sight that can contend with them. And in fact, with the new money that is coming in, they could even get better. You're talking about, they got mad when the Lakers had a three-peat and Shaq and Kobe basically ran through the league, and you had to pass some rules to kind of cut down on their power. So now you got the Golden State Warriors basically clowning the whole league, and they have the possibility to get better. So we may be looking at the 1960s. Hell, you could be looking at the Celtics, where this team could win 4, 5, 6 titles in a row just by adding pieces. So you crushed a team, you crushed a franchise, you hamstrung a franchise, you set them back 5, 6, 7 years, so you could pass this collective bargaining agreement with the rest of the league. And what did you get? You got exactly what you're trying to prevent. And that's what he's talking about with an unintended consequence. Instead of making the league more level, you've got a few good teams, and you got a lot of bad teams and a few mediocre teams. Look how many teams are under 500. Look at all the bad teams with mismatched pieces that don't fit. You have a very unstable league right now, getting coaches fired. You got all these players moving because you can't hold a team together longer than 2 or 3 years. And on top of that, the one and done, where 19-year-olds are coming in, and it takes 4 years to develop these kids. So by the time they're ready to produce, even more they're ready to produce, they don't even have time. They're not even NBA ready, and you have to evaluate them within a couple of years whether you're going to keep them or not, and you got to move them on. So that's why you have all these high round draft picks floating around on the back of somebody else's bench. We laugh at Jim Buss about herding all these kids, these basically cast-offs through the Lakers, trying them out, because he saw that the talent that the high value draft picks, the teams were unwilling or couldn't develop in the right amount of time, and they had to cast them off. He was taking them in, evaluating them, seeing if he could polish them up and make something out of them. And in fact, he's successful. You look at Jordan Hill, you look at Tariq Black, and a couple others. Ed Davis because of the cap. He couldn't, Kobe's contract and the cap, he couldn't keep him. But the thing he proved that the concept was valid. But that's the state of the league, and that is the state of the league as it pertains to the Lakers. Now let's get to the Lakers. Let's get to brass tacks about the Lakers. It's pretty evident that Jeanie Buss and Jim Buss have been basically at loggerheads over this franchise for almost 20 years. You can go back, what is it, 1997? I don't know if it was Sports Illustrated. I think it might have been Sports Illustrated. It might have been ESPN. I have to look up the article where it was discussed or mentioned that the two competing people for this particular franchise was Jim Buss and Jeanie Buss. And when Jerry died, what he did was he split the baby in two. So for the past basically 5 years, you've had these two competing camps: the Jeanie Buss side and the Jim Buss side. Unfortunately, the public does not like Jim Buss and hasn't liked him since he refused to trade Andrew Bynum. You wonder why people don't like Jim Buss? It's not about his hat. It's not about his attitude. It's not about nobody knowing about him. They're still pissed off because Kobe wanted Andrew Bynum gone, which Kobe was absolutely wrong about that. Jim was right. Jim dug in his feet along with his father and kept Andrew Bynum. Ultimately, he was right. Everybody forgets that he was right. They just remember that they hated that Kobe couldn't get who he wanted, and the fans couldn't get the nice little shiny apple, whether it was Jason Kidd or fill in the blank for Andrew Bynum. Andrew Bynum actually anchored the middle of your two championships that you probably would not have had if he had not been there, because he was basically, after Shaq, the biggest center in the league. He was the immovable object. You saw what happened against the Celtics in 2008 without him. They lost, but they won the next two with him. Ultimately, Jim was right. Everybody's hated him since. Now, Jeanie has taken advantage of that, and she backed him into a corner, and he made the infamous statement: if he couldn't figure it out within a certain amount of time, then he would consider stepping down. Now it's, with the albatross of Kobe's contract, not necessarily Kobe, but his contract, which Jeanie tied around his neck, along with the CBA that's now blowing up in all the GM's faces now, because now it's going to be a mad scramble for talent. So whatever plan or roadmap Jim and Mitch actually had is actually going to get blown up. And this is the year where he thought the turnaround would actually come. So like they say, barring a miracle, Jim's not going to get it turned around. And at the end of this year, there's going to be too much pressure on him to step down, resign, and keep his words, which I do, to my chagrin, believe that he will do. I believe that this will probably be Jim's last year. And I don't believe that Mitch, after 35 years of being with the Lakers and 30 years of being their GM, assistant GM, that Mitch is going to consider working for somebody other than a Buss. I don't believe that he will. I believe the stress and the tension and the working environment is going to get to be too much. And I think Jim and Mitch are going to leave to ride off in the sunset together. In fact, they probably already talked about it. And that's probably also what's going to happen with Byron. Byron knows that that's why they set Byron's contract to basically expire at year 3. So when Jim's time is up, Mitch will probably leave, and so will Byron. So at the end of the 2016-2017 season, you're going to have no president, you're going to have no GM, and you're going to have no coach. So you're going to have A group of people that basically helped forge 5 championships in LA. They've basically engineered winning deals, which mentioned Jim actually did. They basically drafted very, very good players. And this last crop of players, regardless of what you think about them, they basically came up with a nice core of 6 players. And if Upshaw happens to develop as a project, that's 7 young players that they actually came up with. There's very few teams in the league that could actually pull that off with this kind of grace and skill. They've basically very skillfully brought in, evaluated talent, upgraded your talent while working under the draft restrictions because of the Steve Nash trade. You have to give kudos to management, regardless of what you think about them, for threading that needle. People hate the devil that they know until they come up against the devil that you don't. New management, new GM, and possibly a whole new structure. Do you think the scouting teams are going to be the same? Do you think all the personnel structure, the assistant coaches, the trainers, all these other people, people that you work with, do you think they're going to be the same? You're going to bring in new people. Do you think that the team is composed the way that a new management wants them to be composed? They may not. They might want to keep all the young core that you built, and they may want to bleed off to pieces. They may like Jordan Clarkson, who's the valuable piece, may be gone. They may not like Julius Randle. He may be gone. They might trade. They might want a more savvy team because they need to get up and running quickly. They may bleed off the old talent, the young talent. So now, instead of going 4 years under the roadmap, you might have to go 4 or 5 more, and then you're really going to have to compete with a lot more money, a lot more people. And Jeanie may or may not bring back Phil Jackson. And if she does, what kind of family dynamic is that going to cause? Because remember, the bus kids vote. And what kind of turmoil is that going to cause in the franchise? Believe it or not, your franchise is basically stable. You might not like it. You may not like having to rebuild, which nobody does. You may not like Jim Buss. But you got to remember, Jim Buss did not start with a silver spoon in his mouth. Jim Buss did not start as president of the Lakers. He had to start as a scout because that's where his father put him, because his father wanted him to learn. He spent 5 years on the road, sleeping, eating bad food, drinking cheap liquor, and staying in hotels and motels, scouting college kids, scouting D-League players. That's what he did. He did that for 5 years before he ever got to sit in an office. And then 5 years after that, he had to sit below Mitch and Jim and train. So by the time he got to be president, he had 10 years in learning this stuff. He knows all the scouts. He knows all the GMs. He knows all the players. He can pick up the phone. He can pick up the phone and call anybody because he knows all these people. You see him at Summer League. You see him scouting games at colleges, which is rare for an owner, regardless of what you think about him. Jim Buss actually knows what he's doing. But you want to put your faith in Jeanie Buss, who's never done this before. She doesn't know about scouts. She doesn't talk to GMs. She's never scouted a player. I'd be more impressed to see Jeanie Buss actually take off the pantsuit, put on some sneakers, and go sit at a college game and start scouting players. She doesn't do that. Jeanie Buss is a banker. Jeanie Buss is a corporate entity. She sits on boardrooms. She talks to Time Warner and she talks to AEG about the business side. That's why Daddy trained her that way. So now you want her to run a team? I tell you, Lake fans, you guys are insane. But if I were Jim Buss, I would do the same thing. After all these years of taking it, after giving you two championships that they built, him and Mitch built, you still get kicked and nobody still trusts you? Life is too short. Jim's almost 60. Mitch is 60. Why stay there and have a heart attack? Because Laker fans don't like you. They're not going to like, if he won another championship, y'all still wouldn't like him. He could win the next three and you would still hate Jim Buss. But 2017, I predict he's gone. I predict he will keep his word. Him, Byron, and Mitch will probably all ride off into the sunset. And then it'll be up to Jeanie to pick up the pieces.